In 2011, a painting sold at Sotheby's for $8.3 million. The buyer was a hedge fund manager. The seller was a respected gallery in New York. The authentication certificate was signed by 3 of the world's leading experts in the artist's work. The provenance documentation traced the painting back to a private European collection from the 1960s. Every single part of that transaction was constructed by one man in a studio apartment in Queens, using brushes he bought at a craft store and paint he mixed himself from raw pigments ordered online. The painting hung in a private collection for 4 years before anyone noticed, not because the forgery was eventually detected by science or scholarship, because the forger, sitting in a different city reading about the sale in an art magazine, told someone at a dinner party. He couldn't help himself. That's how almost every art forgery ends, not with forensics, with ego. The global art market moves $65 billion per year. It is the largest unregulated financial market in the world. No mandatory price disclosure, no licensing requirements for dealers, no standardized authentication process. Estimates suggest that between 20 and 50% of works currently in circulation are either misattributed or outright forgeries. The museums know this, the auction houses know this, the collectors know this. Nobody talks about it because the entire market runs on confidence, and confidence, it turns out, is the easiest thing in the world to forge. Here's what it actually looks like. Every level, every number, every moment where the line between genius and fraud becomes genuinely impossible to locate. Level 1, the student. 21 years old, $0. You can paint better than most professionals. The art world doesn't care. You got into art school on the strength of technical ability that made your professors uncomfortable, not because you were difficult, because you were anachronistic. The art world in the 21st century rewards concept, provocation, cultural commentary, the ability to articulate what your work means in language that sounds like philosophy and functions like marketing. Your work doesn't need articulation. It's technically precise in a way that contemporary art education has largely stopped teaching because the market stopped rewarding it. You can look at a Vermeer and understand at a mechanical level exactly how it was made, the ground preparation, the layering sequence, the specific way 17th century Dutch masters built luminosity through transparent glazes over opaque underlayers. You understand this the way a musician understands counterpoint, not as history, as craft. Your thesis show gets polite reviews. One professor tells you your work is beautifully executed but aesthetically conservative. This is art school for technically impressive, commercially worthless. The painting that wins the thesis prize is a canvas covered in what appears to be dirt, accompanied by a 40-page theoretical statement about post-colonial extraction. It sells at the graduate show for $12,000. Your painting, a technically flawless landscape in the tradition of the Hudson River School, sells for $400 to your aunt. You graduate with $60,000 in debt and a skill set that the contemporary art market has no formal use for. You move to a studio apartment. You take a job framing pictures at a gallery in Chelsea. The gallery sells work by artists whose technical ability is significantly below yours for prices that are significantly above anything you will earn this year. You frame their work, you study it, you notice its weaknesses, the places where the brushwork is uncertain, where the color relationships don't quite resolve, where the artist's limitation is visible to anyone who knows what to look for. You go home, you paint, not to sell, because the act of making something well is the only thing that makes the rest of it bearable. Level 2. The copyist, 24 years old, $35,000 a year. You make legal copies. You discover the copies are indistinguishable from the originals. The Louvre has a formal copyist program. So does the Prado, the Rijksmuseum, the Metropolitan. Artists apply for permission to set up in front of masterworks and reproduce them, for study, for private collectors who want decorative copies, for the simple discipline of understanding how something was made by making it again. You apply. You're accepted. You spend 6 months in front of Vermeer's The Lacemaker. You go home. You paint it from memory. You show it to 3 people who know Vermeer's work. 2 of them ask where you got the reproduction. One of them, a curator at a mid-sized museum, looks at it for a long time and asks who painted it. You tell him it's yours, a copy. He picks it up. He looks at the back. He sets it down. He says nothing for a moment. Then, you understand you shouldn't show this to anyone. You ask why. He says, because most people wouldn't know. This is the moment, not a decision, a revelation. The gap between what something is and what it appears to be is not a gap the art world can reliably close. The expertise that commands $50,000 authentication fees is, in a significant percentage of cases, pattern recognition applied by people whose authority rests on a consensus that nobody wants to challenge because the entire market depends on the consensus holding. You don't do anything with this information. Not yet. You take more copyist commissions. A private collector in Connecticut wants a copy of a Constable landscape for his dining room. He pays $3,000. You deliver it in 6 weeks. He hangs it next to the fireplace and tells his guests it's in the manner of Constable. His guests don't ask follow-up questions. You start experimenting with aging techniques, not to deceive, out of technical curiosity. How do you replicate the specific crackler pattern that develops in oil paint over 200 years? How do you reproduce the yellowing of aged varnish? How do you make a canvas that was stretched last Tuesday feel like it was stretched in 1890? The answers are not difficult to find. They're in conservation literature, in museum technical bulletins, in the restoration notes that major institutions publish openly because transparency about restoration is considered scholarly virtue. The information exists. Nobody assembled it with the specific application you're assembling it for. You are still a copyist. You are becoming something else. Level 3. The first forgery. 27 years old. $180,000 in one transaction. You didn't plan it. It planned itself. It begins with an argument at a dinner party. A dealer, someone you know from the gallery circuit, someone who has sold work by artists considerably less skilled than you for prices considerably more than you've ever received, makes a claim about authentication. He says the eye of an experienced dealer can detect a forgery in under 30 seconds. He says the technical analysis, the provenance research, the laboratory testing, all of it is secondary to the trained eye. You don't say anything at the dinner. You go home, you paint a small work, 9 by 12 inches, oil on panel, in the manner of a minor 19th century American painter whose work occasionally appears at regional auction houses. You age it. You construct a simple provenance, a fictional estate sale in upstate New York, a receipt typed on paper you sourced from an antique store, a gallery label you designed yourself. You bring it to the dealer, not to sell, as a question. You tell him you found it at an estate sale. You ask his opinion. He looks at it for 40 seconds. He tells you it's genuine. He offers to sell it for you. He says he knows a collector who would pay $15,000 for a work like this. You tell him you'll think about it. You think about it for 3 weeks. You think about your $60,000 in student debt. You think about the $400 your aunt paid for your thesis painting. You think about the dealer's absolute confidence in an opinion he formed in 40 seconds about a painting you made in your apartment. You call him. You say yes. The painting sells for $18,000. Your cut, after the dealer's commission, $11,000. You deposit it in your bank account as income from art sales. It's not technically false. You made the art. You sold it. You tell yourself this is a one-time thing. The telling yourself it's one time is part of the architecture of every decision that follows. The one-time framing makes each next step feel like an extension of the previous step rather than a new decision. By the time you've done it 8 times, the original one time has become a career, and the career has its own momentum. Level 4. The operation. 31 years old. $2.3 million across 4 years. You're not forging paintings anymore. You're forging artists. The scale shift happens when you understand the real product. The painting is not the product. The story is the product. A canvas with paint on it is worth whatever the market decides based on who made it and when and under what circumstances. The authentication, the provenance, the paper trail, the expert opinions, the gallery history is the mechanism by which the market makes that decision. Your skill set has 2 components. You can make the painting and you can construct the authentication. Most forgers only do the first. The ones who get caught quickly only do the first. You do both. Your operation now targets a specific category of artist, significant but not famous enough to have comprehensive catalog raisonnés, the scholarly publications that document an artist's complete output. A fully documented artist is difficult to forge because every new work requires explanation for its absence from the existing record. An underdocumented artist has gaps. Gaps accommodate new discoveries. New discoveries are what the market calls forgeries when they're caught, and overlooked works when they're not. You identify 3 artists whose work fits the profile. You research them exhaustively, not just their paintings, their lives, their documented movements, their studio practices, the specific periods when their output is least documented, when a new discovery would be plausible rather than suspicious. You construct not just paintings, but contexts, a letter typed on period paper in period ink, referencing a specific work placed in an archive, a photograph found in an estate showing the artist in front of something that might be your painting, donated to a local historical society that doesn't have the resources to verify it. The provenance you construct is not a single document, it's a web. Each thread is individually verifiable. The web holds because no single examiner looks at all the threads simultaneously. The first major auction house sale happens when you're 29. A work attributed to a significant early 20th century American painter, fresh from a fictional Swiss private collection, authenticated by an expert who charges $40,000 for the service and produces a 12-page report that cites your planted archival evidence as support for the attribution. The painting sells for $340,000. Your net, after the dealer who fronted the transaction takes his cut, $190,000. You feel something at this moment that is different from anything you felt before. Not pride in the craft. You've had that since you were 21. Something darker. The satisfaction of watching a system that told you your talent had no value assign extraordinary value to your talent without knowing it's yours. The art world rejected you. You are now operating inside it invisibly, extracting from it, funded by the confidence of the experts who dismissed you. This is the most dangerous feeling in this career, not because it makes you reckless, because it makes you feel justified. Justified people don't know when to stop. Level 5. The peak. 36 years old. $11 million in total proceeds. You are the best in the world at something no one can know. At your peak, you are running 4 simultaneous identities, not your own identity. 4 fictional artists whose rediscovered works are entering the market through different channels in different cities. Each identity has a consistent style, a documented biography constructed from genuine historical records with specific gaps you've exploited, and a network of planted evidence that would withstand examination by any single investigator who doesn't have access to the others. The technical mastery at this level is extraordinary in ways that the art world's legitimate hierarchy will never acknowledge. You have reverse engineered the specific paint formulations of 5 different historical periods. You have sourced 19th century canvas from estate sales and Victorian-era frames from demolition salvage companies. You have learned to read the specific stress patterns in aged wood supports and reproduce them artificially in ways that pass X-ray examination. You have also learned something about the art world that its practitioners know but don't discuss. The authentication process is, at its foundation, a social process. Expert opinion is not formed in isolation from other expert opinion. When a respected dealer expresses confidence in a work, that confidence creates conditions under which other experts are more likely to confirm it, not from dishonesty, from the cognitive dynamics of authority and social proof that affect every human judgment. You exploit this systematically. The first opinion you obtain is always from the most credible source you can access. Every subsequent opinion is easier. Your total proceeds across 7 years, $11 million, distributed across accounts in 3 countries, laundered through legitimate art sales you make under your real name, your actual paintings, which have improved to the point that they sell for real money now, the irony of which is not lost on you. You live well, but not conspicuously. A good apartment, not an extraordinary one. Travel, but economy class. You understand that conspicuous consumption is how forgers get caught, even when the forgeries don't. You know this because you've studied every major art forgery case in history. Han van Meegeren, who sold paintings to the Nazis and was caught when the Allies traced one of them back to him. Elmire de Hory, who forged Matisse and Picasso for decades and was undone by a biographer who found inconsistencies. Wolfgang Beltracchi, who forged early 20th century German expressionists with extraordinary skill and was caught because he used titanium white, a pigment that didn't exist until 1921 in a painting he claimed dated from 1914. Titanium white, a single anachronistic pigment in a single painting. 11 years of successful forgery, undone by one tube of paint. You have memorized every pigment's introduction date. You have memorized every canvas weave pattern's period. You make no technical errors. This is both your greatest strength and your most dangerous vulnerability. You are so confident in your technical perfection that you have begun to underestimate the only risk you cannot control, yourself. Level 6, the unraveling. 39 years old. The forgeries are still perfect. The forger is not. The art world has a term for what happens to forgers at this level: isolation of success. You are the best in the world at something you cannot discuss with anyone. Every professional achievement you've accumulated, the technical mastery, the operational sophistication, the ability to construct historical reality from raw materials, exists in a compartment that is sealed from every other part of your life. You cannot be proud of it in any social context. You cannot explain it to anyone who might understand it. You cannot receive recognition for work that represents your highest capabilities. The dinner parties is where it starts. Small things, the way you respond when someone makes a confident and incorrect statement about a painting, the way you correct a dealer's attribution at a gallery opening with a specificity that makes him look at you differently, the way you cannot quite stop yourself from the precise observation that reveals you understand something you shouldn't. You are not stupid. You know what you're doing. You do it anyway. Because the alternative, sitting quietly while people who understand less than you say things that are wrong about things you know better than anyone, has become intolerable in a way it wasn't when you were 27. The investigation doesn't begin dramatically. It begins with a conservator at a regional museum who is preparing a small work for loan and notices something under ultraviolet light. The ground preparation is inconsistent with the attributed period. She writes a note in an internal file. The note sits for 8 months. A graduate student doing archival research reads it and connects it to a similar observation in a different institution's records. 2 observations become a pattern. A pattern becomes a case file. A case file becomes a federal investigation that you don't know about for 4 months. You find out the way everyone finds out. Too late.